Manx Radio's Update with Beth Espy.
Well, Fastamai, good evening. How are you this Wednesday? Hopefully ready for a rundown of the day's main news. Coming up before 5:30, we've heard that the Royal College of Nursing is balloting members employed by Manx Care on whether they consider strike action after their latest pay offer was rejected in November. We're going to hear in a few minutes from the RCN. Also tonight, as the steam packet relaxes its rules around adult to child ratios, we're going to hear from the company's CEO about what's prompted that change. And also, government's removed 15 bills from its legislative plan over the past year. What are they and why? And in the past few minutes, we've just heard the steam packet sailing tonight to Heysham will be going ahead. We'll be taking a look at the other travel as well. Let's start, as usual, with a roundup of the day's main headlines with Lewis. Fastamai.
The steam packet says it had no choice but to introduce stricter policies for travelling with children.
Children could be scolded by a hot drink or fall overboard or something like that.
The ferry operator recently faced backlash for enforcing a ratio of 1 adult per 5 children for group bookings on its vessels, but today it's announced it's changing that to 1 adult per 8 children after working on a solution with the Department of Education, Sport and Culture. The Chief Minister says politicians need to be prepared to make tough decisions around the triple lock guarantee for pensions. It's after plans to introduce the Manx pension guarantee were paused just days before the budget was announced. Manx Care has accused an Onken MHK of making sweeping and factually inaccurate statements in Tynwald. It follows Julie Edge's claim that Noble's Hospital was almost at a code red for staffing levels over the weekend. The health body has confirmed there was a code red security incident on Sunday on the acute medical unit, but it did not relate to staffing levels. And work permit applications are said to be rising, with the health sector labelled as a key driver of inward migration. Passport processing times have also improved, now taking 45 days instead of 90. In the latest international news, Donald Trump's launched an online attack of Volodymyr Zelensky, calling Ukraine's president a dictator who better move fast or he won't have a country left. The White House appeared to blame Ukraine for Russia's invasion last night and made inaccurate claims about Mr. Zelensky's approval ratings. Emma Raducanu says she's proud of how she competed at the Dubai Tennis Championships after what she called a difficult experience yesterday. Organisers say a man displaying fixated behaviour approached her before he was removed by security. Airfares, non-alcoholic drinks, meat, bread and cereal are apparently behind an unexpected jump in UK inflation to 3% last month. It's the highest rate for almost a year. And the pranksters sent runners on a detour some 2.5 kilometres long at a 10k trial race in Glasgow. The woman's said to have buried direction signs and posed as a marshal. Those are the headlines. I'll be back with the news at 6 o'clock.
Thank you very much indeed, Lewis. That's a lot of effort to go to, isn't it? Now the weather brought to you by Manx Glass and Glazing. Cloudy this evening with rain soon arriving from the west. That will be heavy at times. A fresh to strong southeast wind. That'll turn to the south. It's going to reach gale force in places overnight, but temperatures still remaining quite mild. That rain, unfortunately, going to continue tomorrow morning. It will clear, though, in the afternoon, and the rest of the day tomorrow will be dry with some sunny spells. The strong to gale force southerly wind is going to ease a little bit as well in the afternoon. Temperatures around 11 Celsius. And then just looking ahead to Friday, again, a wet and windy start to the day. Outbreaks of rain accompanied by southerly gales, but the afternoon will be dry. Some sunny intervals again soon developing. The gale force southerly wind will veer southwest and it will ease as the last of the rain through Friday clears. Top temperatures again on Friday around 11. Sunset this evening will be at 5:35. Sunrise tomorrow morning 7:28.
Manx Glass and Glazing can supply and install single, double and triple glazing. Call 674 573 or visit the showroom on the Snugborough Trading Estate.
Cannell's Agricultural Supplies have been serving the good folk of the north for over 30 years, supplying homegrown wheats, whole and rolled oats, working clothing, fencing, animal feeds, parts, tools and emergency supplies. Call Julia on 880206 or find Cannell's on Facebook.
Patricia Wild Opticians is celebrating over 30 years of friendly, caring service in Farm Hill and Ramsey. Visit us for professional eye care with stress-free parking. Phone Patricia Wild Opticians on 813 977.
For over 25 years, Langness Maintenance Services have been the block paving specialists, including property maintenance, fencing and landscaping. Fast, reliable and competitive. For a free no-obligation quote, call Paddy on 49667. Langness Maintenance Services, 49667.
A ground source heat pump can save thousands of pounds a year, and you can harness this energy on island with Geothermal Limited, the water borehole experts. Visit drilling.im and see how a ground source heat pump borehole works. That's drilling.im.
It's 5:05 and you're listening to Update here on Manx Radio FM. Now, as you may have heard on yesterday's programme, the Royal College of Nursing is balloting members employed by Manx Care on whether they would consider strike action after their latest 4% pay offer was rejected in November. Now, the union is urging every member to have their say and help shape the future of nursing pay on the island. The senior regional officer for the Isle of Man is David Hopton. He was asked by Simon Richardson what he thought might be considered by nurses as an acceptable offer.
We don't prescribe a figure or a number that we think our members would be happy to accept. I think that sits in the hands of our members to decide. So we're open to receiving improved offers from Manx Care. And just to add to the 4% offer, the offer also included excluding staff who had left Manx Care employment beyond April 2024, excluded them from that pay uplift, and that did play a part in our members' decision to reject the offer.
Now, Manx Care's financial problems, as we've said, have been well documented, and nurses had 2 rounds of strike action in 2023. Do you feel there's a willingness among them to once again take the route of last resort and withdraw their labour?
And that's why we're going to the indicative ballot. We want to make sure that our members are clear with us on what their views are. And I can't speak for what those views will be at this time, so we need to wait to see what they come back with us. But we want to be clear that the RCN always sees industrial action as a last resort, but we're also clear that the skill, professionalism and the safety critical work that nurses undertake on the Isle of Man has historically been undervalued, and that patients are being put at risk due to the staffing crisis on the Isle of Man.
You were in contact, obviously, with officers in the Isle of Man from the union. How would you judge morale among nurses on the island at the moment?
I would say our membership is pretty exercised. I think they are keen to ensure that their skill and their professionalism is recognised. Nurses have historically been undervalued, underpaid, and we need to continue that hard work in making sure that pay is restored, and so that we're effectively recognised for the work that our members do and that nurses do.
You mentioned about the risk to patients. Is there a feeling that patients are being put at risk by what you've described as a staffing crisis?
Well, there is a clear link between nursing pay and being able to recruit the right staff on the island, on the Isle of Man. There is, if we do not have the correct numbers of staff, staffing wards, staffing units out in the community, then there is a causal link. There is a risk to patient safety.
That is the Senior Regional Officer for the Isle of Man's Royal College of Nursing. Now, we have contacted Manx Care. They've told us a revised pay offer was made to colleagues employed on Manx pay terms and condition contracts in November last year. That comprised 4% for 24-25. Manx Care says it's aware of the Royal College of Nursing's position with regard to this offer and remains committed to working with RCN to resolve the pay dispute. It's coming up to 5:09, and we're going to stay with Manx Care because the body has accused an Oncan MHK of making sweeping and factually incorrect statements in Tynwald this week. Now, this follows Julie Edge's claim that Nobles Hospital was almost at a code red for staffing levels over the weekend. News editor Tessa Hawley is with us now in the studio. And Tessa, this all centres around comments that Julie Edge made during her contribution to the budget debate, doesn't it?
It does, and it's fair to say in Tynwald the state of the Manx Health Service was one of the main talking points. So Oncan MHK Julie Edge, when discussing it, claimed that staffing pressures at Nobles Hospital were almost at code red level, and here's what she said.
There was knowledge in nursing circles this weekend that we were possibly on a code red in Nobles Hospital for staffing levels. But we also know that bank workers have been stopped. The very nurses that we would have needed to stop a code red, but they've been stopped by these 2 individuals that have come in to look at efficiencies and effectiveness. Stopping frontline workers is impacting safe levels of care for our people.
So that's Julie Edge, MHK. And Tessa, once you'd made those comments, naturally we went to Manx Care, didn't we? How did they respond?
So we did. We flagged this to Manx Care and asked for clarification over her comments. And the health body initially told us via a short statement that there was a code red situation, but it was not caused by a shortage of staff. Manx Care said it was instead related to an isolated security incident, which was carefully managed by staff who are fully trained to deal with such situations and was resolved.
OK, so what's happened next then?
So after providing that clarification, Manx Care went one step further. We received a second, much more extensive statement, which went into more detail and further disputed the Onken MHK's claims. So they confirmed that the code red incident took place in the acute medical unit at 10:09 p.m. on Sunday. It also provided more clarity around code red situations in general, saying the term is used internally within the hospital setting to alert porters and other staff to a security incident that requires assistance and possible intervention. Now, Manx Care says any suggestion that nurses were put at risk was incorrect, as staffing levels over the weekend did not drop below designated and agreed minimum safe staffing levels.
And did Manx Care say anything about safe staffing levels?
So it did, and basically the health body says if staffing levels had dropped below the required numbers, the associate directors of nursing who were on duty over the weekend would have been alerted to this. They would then have been asked to approve additional staffing, with those in question described as being extremely well placed to judge the requirements to ensure the safety of all staff and patients. At the time of the code red situation, there were 4 registered nurses and 2 healthcare assistants on duty on that ward, and that was above the minimum safe staffing levels agreed. And Manx Care adds, in relation to what Ms Edge said, statements based on hearsay can be very unhelpful and lead to unnecessary anxiety for the public.
Tessa, thank you very much indeed. We have, of course, invited Julie Edge to respond to Manx Care's latest statement. We'll see if that happens and bring that to you as soon as we can. 12 minutes past 5. Now, over the past year, government has removed 15 bills from its legislative plan. The latest Our Island Plan update has been published on the Tynwald Register of Business. That's ahead of debate on that in March. Siobhan has been taking a look at this and joins me now. So, Siobhan, what do we know?
So, of the 15 bills which have been dropped, 3 are from the Cabinet Office, 1 from Treasury, 2 from the Department of Infrastructure, 3 from the Department of Health and Social Care, 4 from the Department of Home Affairs, 1 from the Department for Enterprise and 1 from the Department of Environment, Food and Agriculture. The reason for removal ranged from prioritisation of other island plan objectives to paused until such time that resource can be allocated. However, some of the bills have been long promised, including the DOI's Coastal Footpath Bill, which has been dropped as, quote, further work is being carried out to determine whether that bill is required.
That's really interesting because I think it's fair to say that's a bill that's been a while in the making.
Yeah, so the DOI's Coastal Footpath Bill has been through several stages of consultation in the island's branches. You might remember back on Tynwald Day in 2021, Manx resident David Buttery submitted a petition regarding the island's footpaths. That was later picked up by Douglas South MHK Sarah Maltby, and subsequently a committee was formed which began taking evidence in February 2022. It published a report into the topic, which was accepted by Tynwald in November 2022, and members agreed to look at a more efficient way of coordinating the maintenance of footpaths, but further updates have seemingly stalled since then. In July last year, Mrs Maltby said that the island needed to get its act together and sort out the state of the public rights of way, and several Manx Radio listeners agreed.
Now, obviously, that's just one of the 15 bills. 14 others have also been dropped. Do we have any reasons as to why?
Well, a lack of resources does seem to be an issue for several pieces of legislation. For example, the DOI has removed its Housing and Communities Bill, saying that its resources should be focused on more deliverable priorities. The Department for Enterprise has pulled its Civil Registration Bill, stating it's complex legislation, and the department currently lacks the resources to progress the bill during this administration. Does add that it intends to progress it in the longer term.
Now, the full list of bills you can find at manxradio.com. Siobhan, we have invited the various ministers of departments to respond. Have we heard back from any of them?
Yes, so obviously they have been in Tynwald much of the last 2 days, but the Treasury Minister, Alex Allinson, has sent us a statement regarding the bill from his department. He said after detailed consultation with the Criminal Injury Compensation Scheme panel chair and in response to their annual report, they've agreed not to develop a new and unique criminal injury compensation bill due to the time this was forecast to develop. His full statement's at manxradio.com. We're also expecting to sit down with Justice and Home Affairs Minister Jane Peel-Wilson, so we'll be running through the rest of the legislation with her.
And again, we'll bring you any details on that as soon as we have them. Now, Siobhan, just stay with us for a moment, please, because back on Monday, we heard about recommendations from the latest Children's Champion report that was due to be debated in Tynwald this week. It has been today. It took around 3 hours and you were listening in. I know you compiled that report for us on Monday. What can you tell us about what happened today?
Yeah, so the debate was quite lengthy and went into a lot of detail. It got a bit confusing. In the end, there were 5 different amendments tabled by various Tynwald members. The current Children's Champion, Kerry Sharp MLC, put forward 7 recommendations in total in her report. And around about an hour and 15 minutes ago, all but 2 of them passed, but 4 were amended.
Now, which recommendations failed?
That would be recommendations 5 and 7. They concerned accommodation for young people with additional needs but no learning disability who cannot live independently and who need a carer on site 24/7, and that call for an overall strategy for children with complex needs that was featured in depth in that discussion on Monday.
So what was agreed in the end then?
Recommendations 1 through 3 were passed as amended by the Chief Minister. They concern the exploration of how an official channel can be established through which the voices of young carers can be heard by government, the development of independent advocacy services, and the assessment home needs to be improved so it's good enough for one's own child. Recommendation 4 was the contentious one. That was passed as amended by both Claire Barber, MHK, and Diane Kelsey, MLC. Recommendation 6 also passed and was not amended. And that's the recommendation we also spoke about a lot in our breakfast programme on Monday morning. That means that a government multi-agency complex needs nursery with specialist staff should be developed on the island.
And I understand there was a further recommendation that was added by members, was it?
Yeah, so Ramsey MHK Laurie Hooper wanted to see the re-establishment of the corporate parenting group, which had been disbanded in the last couple of years. That was passed by his fellow Tynwald members.
Siobhan, thank you so much. As you say, it's quite complicated, a lot to process there, and we will have much more on it in the coming days. 17.5 minutes past 5 now.
Manx Radio Travel, driven by Quayside Tyres and Service Centre.
Well, nothing to report on the police pages, so hopefully your drive home will be okay this evening. All looking good down at the airport and at the steam packet as well. That sailing this evening had been under some doubt because of the weather, but it is going ahead. So the Manxman due into Douglas at around about 10 to 6 and will be heading out for Heysham again at 7:15. Is worth noting though, the steam packet is monitoring weather forecasts from today right through until Monday. There is going to potentially be some impact on sailings because of the weather, but we'll keep you up to date on that if and when it happens.
Ask how you can spread the cost interest-free at Quayside.
18 minutes past 5. We're going to stay with the steam packet because the company has announced today that it's relaxing its adult to child ratio for group bookings on its vessels. Now, this is after changes to its policies were implemented last year, as Amy Griffiths reports.
In October, the ferry operator introduced a new policy requiring 1 adult to be booked for every 5 children. The move was said to be to ensure the safety and comfort of passengers, crew and vessels at all times, something the steam packet said it couldn't compromise on. It was widely criticised, though, with the Education Minister going as far to say it could stop off-island trips for school students completely. Today, the steam packets announced a series of changes to that policy. Now, the ratio will be 1 adult per 8 under 16s. However, schools and organisations will have to review and sign updated travel conditions before booking, and additional safety briefings and onboard measures have also been introduced. The company says these changes have been endorsed by the Department of Education, Sport and Culture after extensive consultation and feedback from schools, sports and community groups. Managing Director Brian Thompson says safety is their top priority, but recognises the importance of striking a balance between accessibility and responsible travel. He says the new measures will ensure all young passengers are appropriately supervised. The changes will come into force with immediate effect, and the Steam Packet says it will work closely with schools, clubs and travel organisers to facilitate a smooth transition to the new ratios.
Amy Griffiths reporting. Well, Brian Thompson is Managing Director of the Steam Packet. He's been telling us more about the changes and why they've been made.
We had identified that there was an issue with large groups of children travelling and their supervision, so we'd taken some action. There was a bit of a backlash about that. So we've reviewed that situation, we've worked with the Department of Education, Sport and Culture, and we've come up with a new set of mitigations to try and alleviate those safety concerns.
And what are those mitigations?
So there's a huge list of them, and I don't really want to run through them all, but all of the groups will have these mitigations available to them. So there are things like allocated seating, if children are moving around the vessel, they're supervised, just general stuff like that, because there's two things here. We were seeing a lot of antisocial behaviour that was upsetting passengers, but also sort of dangerous situations where children could be scolded by a hot drink or fall overboard or something like that. So we cannot ignore that once it's been identified to us from our staff on board. So working together with the Department of Education, Sport and Culture, I think it's a brilliant thing to collaborate like that. They're experts in childcare and we are experts in safety on board the vessel. So it was nice to come together and actually reach an agreement that will allow groups of children to travel.
That is the Managing Director of the Steam Packet, Brian Thompson, who was speaking to us a little bit earlier this afternoon. Much more to that interview. We're going to bring you it more in depth on Friday, but an example, I guess, of them hearing what people have said. Those changes, when they were first implemented, didn't go down particularly well with certain groups of people. So the Steam Packet has heard that and have now relaxed those adult to child ratios. You can find out more about this at manxradio.com. 22 minutes past 5 just about. So what goes on in the mind of a motorcycle racer, and what are the big mental tools needed to succeed? Well, one MGP competitor is putting his full-time professional skills to use to learn more about just that. Working in collaboration with others, Stephen Walsh is planning to look into the sports psychology behind bike racing and motorsport more generally.
The thing I find very interesting about the bikes is even though it's an individual sport, it's kind of not. You need a huge amount of people to help you. That gets you through things, because when the bike breaks down, when you fall off, when it needs fixing, because everyone's pulling the one direction, everyone is really keen to get you on. And work-wise, I think the insights that I've got from the bikes have really fed into the work, and we're spreading it out a bit. I'm doing a bit of work, the guy called Otto Lappi in Finland and Sean Moriarty here in the Kerry Motor Club and the rally side of things. And I'm kind of hoping to develop, because there's not a whole lot of research or data on this, I'm starting to pull together a data bank, try and get some performance-oriented research going with regard to motorsport generally. Obviously, because I'm biased with a bit of a focus on the bikes.
What have you learned about the competitive nature of motorsport?
Sport is really good fun, but it's way more than that. And I think it's about winning, but the win isn't necessarily being first. I mean, for me, sometimes the win is just to get around without falling off. But if you decide if you're 35th, the win will be finishing 34th next time. The thing that I love about all sports, particularly ours, is I love watching people trying hard and then when it clicks.
What you've learned about how to get in the best possible headspace then, from a psychology point of view, what would be the best sort of advice you'd have for people?
I think the biggest thing you can do is think about your thinking. When I was doing a session with Sean Moriarty and the rally lads, I was saying to them about Barack Obama. He wears the same suit all the time. And the reason that he does that is that he doesn't have to think about what suit he's going to wear next. And if you think about it, on the bike, the most valuable resource we have is our attention. So if we think about how we're going to apply that attention before we're in the situation of having to apply it, we'll help ourselves a lot. If you can bring the Barack Obama approach to suit wearing to your bike racing, it's a help.
That is Stephen Walsh. You want to hear what the Barack Obama approach is. You can hear the full and extended interview with Stephen Walsh on our Journey to a Dream podcast. You can find that via the podcast section on our website. And I say he is an MGP competitor. He's been over here. This is hopefully, if he gets accepted, going to be his third year. He hasn't had the best of luck up until now, but a fascinating chat with him. Speaking of fascinating, Rob Pritchard.
Fast am I. Taking a look at the sports side of things then. Starting off with rugby, and former Isle of Man player Patrice Bell has made his senior debut for Sale Sharks. Bell made his maiden appearance for the club as he was named in the starting 15 for Sale Sharks' 19-17 victory over Newcastle Falcons on Sunday. Bell, whose former clubs include Southern Nomads and Castle Rushen High School, was one of 4 debutants in the squad last weekend, along with Ollie Davis, Dom Hansen and Alfie Longstaff. What's more, he was included in the same squad as fellow former Manx resident and 2023 Isle of Man Sportsman of the Year, Bevan Rodd. Well, during 2024, Bell was gaining match experience for Sedgley Park Tigers in National 1. That's the third tier of English rugby, so that refers to club level. He was also selected in the Ireland squad for last year's Under-26 Nations tournament, helping that national side to a second place finish and just 1 point behind table toppers England. Elsewhere, athletics. A selection of the Isle of Man's half-marathon competitors have impressed in off-island competitions in the past few days. There was a personal best and top 3 finish secured by Carolyn Mayers at the Barcelona half-marathon on Sunday, as she was one of 2 local competitors taking part in the meeting along with Helen Taylor. Well, Mayers' new personal benchmark was also coupled with finishing 3rd overall in the female V50 class, as the Manx Harriers athlete crossed the line in 1 hour, 27 minutes and 37 seconds. Taylor, meanwhile, finished only just outside the top 10 in that age group, clocking 1 hour, 37 minutes and 56 seconds to finish 12th in class. Well, on the same day in Wales, Paul and Dawn Atherton were the Western AC representatives across the male and female Vet 40 categories in the Wrexham Half Marathon. Dawn's time of 1 hour, 25 minutes and 22 seconds took more than a minute off her personal previous benchmark, finishing 6th in class. And Paul took 2 seconds off his PB, recording 1 hour, 15 minutes, 55 seconds to finish 10th in the male Vet 40. And in motorsport, another young Ireland prospect in motocross racing has made a winning start to the season. 8-year-old Torrin Lennon managed to claim a victory in the Auto MX50 class during the first round of the FAM Andalusian Motocross Championship on Sunday. He managed a first and second place finish across 2 races to end the round 2nd overall, with the next phase of the championship taking place on the 1st and 2nd of March.
Well, we wish Torrin all the very best for that. Rob, thank you very much indeed. That's all from Update this evening. Do tune in to breakfast tomorrow morning. We're going to have an interview with the Treasury Minister, who's going to be available from 8 a.m. to answer any questions that you might have about this year's budget. Our budget coverage brought to you by Crow, Isle of Man. The Treasury Minister available for around half an hour or so plenty of time for you to get your questions in. As I say, that's all from tonight's update. Coming up next, your weekly dose of arts and culture. It's Spotlight, brought to you by the Isle of Man Arts Council with Howard Kane. At 6 p.m, Chris Kinley's here with Greatest Hits. At 9, it's Ernie's Eclectic, and then Ree is with you from 10 with After Hours. Have a great evening, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.